Episode 22. Can you trust the iPhone SE? It's been a while since I did a Can You Trust video after I covered all of the tech YouTubers that I wanted to ask that question about. And you can check out those videos if you haven't before at a playlist that I'll link, right someplace. Anyway, now I'm going to rework the series into a series that asks the same question about tech companies, people in the industry who might be newsworthy, mainly wherever, whenever there's something that challenges the status quo in tech that might be shaking things up. I'll try to answer that question for you. Can you trust it? Why? If you have any suggestions on what I might cover, let me know in the comments below. I'll make a list, okay? In the meantime, let's get to the question at hand. Can you trust the iPhone SE? It's an interesting question, one we wouldn't have likely asked a year ago. What does it mean to ask if you can trust a phone? There's not a lot different about the iPhone SE 2020 when compared to the iPhone SE 2016. It does basically the same thing. It takes an older body style, updates it to the current specs of the most recent iPhones, and comes in at a price much lower than we typically see for a brand new iPhone. It matters all the more in the past year or so as the smartphone market has started to flatten out. Flagship phones have gotten more expensive, but the demand for them has not increased. In fact, over the last few years, there hasn't been much of a change between one flagship model to the next, from one company to the next. Yes, there have been minor improvements here and there, but nothing earth-shattering, and nothing certainly worth paying $1,000 for year after year after year. Most people who follow tech, and particularly a lot of people who follow smartphone tech, have a very skewed idea about what's important in a smartphone. We tend to look at the small differences from year to year and perseverate over megapixels or an improved refresh rate that has totally changed the game, but for the majority of people, it doesn't. Most people buy their phones because they need a phone. Maybe it's fun to have a few bells and whistles at the beginning, but after the honeymoon period wears off, it's back to calls and social media and texting and videos and I don't know what else, whatever people do with their phones. The use case for the smartphone, for most people, is pretty limited to the basic things that you do with the smartphone, and bells and whistles don't matter. And since phones really haven't improved by leaps and bounds year after year the way they did up to, say, 2017-ish, maybe 2016-ish, the flagship market of phones has become glutted with really cool but overpriced phones that are pretty much unnecessary for just about everybody except a very small group of people.
Don't panic.
The argument for the iPhone SE goes something like this. It brings back Touch ID, which a lot of people have been holding back from buying a new phone because Touch ID didn't exist anymore. It's a smaller form factor than any other phone that Apple sells at the moment. It will get support for many years. The materials are fantastic for the price point. The bigger bezels mean no notch. Most important, it starts at $400. And yes, I know you can name 24 phones out there on the Android side that cost as much or less and have better specs than this phone on paper, blah, 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 blah. But all those phones don't matter here for one very specific reason. They are not iPhones. And that's the reason this phone matters as much as it does right now. Apple still sells phones that can top $1,500 when fully spec'd. But in years past, all they offered were really expensive iPhones that, caused you to go into a pretty significant debt to have. In the past couple of years, we've seen the iPhone XR and the iPhone 11 come down and hit the lower price points, and they are very, very good phones as well, but neither of them is available new for less than $500. In the old days, like a few years ago, OnePlus was a great bargain because you could get 90% of a flagship phone for half the price, as MKBHD once said. You can't really say that about OnePlus now, but at the time, it was true, and the same is true for the iPhone SE. You get like 80 to 90% of the top-line iPhones for less than half the price. In the past couple of years, Apple has started pushing their services like Apple Music and Apple TV and news and blah, 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 and games and arcades and all these kinds of things. Also, the sales of iPhones And pretty much the rest of the smartphones have dropped, have flattened, Apple's not selling as many phones. Nobody is selling as many phones. It's been this way for a little while. They're still making more money because the prices keep going up, but that's a bubble that was always going to burst. And 2020 and everything that's going on right now has stuck a big pin in that smartphone bubble. Apple looks like they're geniuses right now for having the iPhone SE ready to launch in the middle of a global crisis that will impact people's lives financially for years to come. The SE also opens the door to a lot of people who could never afford to own an iPhone in the past, regardless of the worldwide economic situation. More iPhones in more hands that couldn't or didn't have them before means more money for Apple. Okay, it's simple. I know in the rest of the world the iPhone SE isn't the crazy great deal that it is in the US, and I that really sucks. But it doesn't take away from the importance of the iPhone SE right here, right now in the US, but also in Apple's overall mindset as a company. In years past, I've been critical of Apple because they seem to be deaf to the feedback from their customers and just did whatever they felt like doing. Very egomaniacal, very, entitled, I don't know, whatever. They took away our ports. They took away our headphone jacks. And they were the first to charge $1,000 for a phone, all that kind of stuff. But the Apple of the past year or two is different. They've made mistakes, but they've tried to fix them for the most part. But what's most important, they seem to be on the side of the consumer for the first time, maybe in the history of the company. Or, maybe they just figured out you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. I don't know. Regardless, the relationship between Apple and its customers has always been a little love-hate. They knew the best way to do whatever it is that they were trying to help you do, and the customer was just going to have to do it the way that they said they were going to do it. And there's still some of that to Apple. I mean, honestly, what else? What else are we going to do? Go buy a PC? Get an Android phone? I joke, but think about it. Apple has come around to making compromises when it's feasible, and the iPhone SE is the perfect example of just that phenomenon. It's not the best iPhone they've ever made, which they always love to say, but it's a pretty great iPhone, and it'll give a lot of people a lot of good service over the next few years. And yes, it'll put more money in Apple's pockets, but I mean, they are a business, so should we really punish them for that? And right now, they seem to be a company that's pivoting at just the right moment to something that's a little bit more consumer friendly.
You keep using the word.
Can you trust the iPhone SE? Yes. And for the first time in a lot of years, I'd cautiously say that trust extends all the way out to Apple as a company. The iPhone SE is an example of a company that makes great products, dialing it back just a little to bring more people into the fold to make their stuff more available. The iPhone SE is a compromise, but it's everything it needs to be in all the right places. Tell me what you think down in the comments, and check out other Can You Trust videos right up here, and subscribe for more Can You Trust and other tech-related videos and reviews and commentary and that kind of thing. Thanks so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. My name's Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech. Tech so honest it hurts. Until the next time, I'm out.
Inconceivable.